What's up, guys? Glad you're here. Please click subscribe if you have not. I don't think I said click right.
Clip.
Hit the
Clip.
clip.
Subscribe.
Hit that subscribe button, and yeah, I'd love to hear any comments. And don't forget, you can click the bell to get notifications when we start.
And one thing I wanted to mention: if some of you guys have been commenting, that you want better audio. So if you are having a hard time listening to maybe older episodes, you can always find these on just audio version on iTunes, Spotify, basically any podcasting app out there. So if you don't want to watch us, you can always go listen to us.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Okay, so we did it. What if I feel bad about being sexual?
Been there, done that. All right, so I wanted to pop over and just say a quick promo because I get a lot of thank yous. I actually we both got these really beautiful thank yous in the mail, and they're just beautiful, heartfelt thank yous, and always saying, well, what can we do to thank you? You guys have had this impact on our life. Well, one really simple way to say thank you is our $2 option over on Patreon. It helps us not come out of pocket to give you guys this free content each week for the podcast. So it helps with the production side, and it helps with taking care of the behind the scenes that you guys don't always get to see. And so we're just really thankful today for our $2 patrons. And
Absolutely.
you guys can pop over to Patreon and do that. It's just a simple way to say thank you. And if you want more tips and tricks, a little more education and how to, then you can bump over to the $20 a month option, which gives you that. We're going to do our Q&A right after this podcast and post it in Patreon. And then, of course, we have our more intimate one-on-one group calls that we do. And that option, I believe, right now is $100 a month. So there you go.
All right, guys, let's jump into a review. This is called Healing and Helping. It says this: I initially stumbled across your podcast when I was looking for help on how to cope with my husband's alcohol addiction. But as I listened, I realized I never fully grasped the fact that he is so addicted to porn. I had never even heard the phrase betrayal trauma, but immediately resonated with Ashlyn's journey. Your podcast has given me a clear picture of the difference between sobriety and true recovery, and it has encouraged me to stay firm in my boundaries for my own well-being and to encourage my husband to pursue not just outward compliance, but inward restoration. Shortly after I started listening to you guys, a close friend shared with me that her husband had an affair, and she had absolutely no idea where to turn for help because she lives in a small community. I immediately shared your podcast with her, and she has found a lot of comfort and wisdom in your words as well. Thank you for modeling the pursuit of health and healing, as well as sharing your journey with others so they can heal too. Oh, that was awesome. This part really struck me when she said that she was encouraging her husband not to for outward compliance, but inward restoration. Man, I totally resonate with that, and I just want to say thanks for sending that in. Remember, if for those of you who are listening, I'd love to have you rate and review the podcast, and the more reviews, the more ratings that we get, the more searchable and the easier found this podcast can be. So you might not want to share an episode. That might not be your jam, but if you review and rate, that will help us help others find the podcast.
And how powerful is it to just have that personal one-on-one, like she mentioned, sharing with a friend? It's powerful.
That's
Absolutely.
cool.
Yes.
So thank you.
Okay, so it is the final week of Sextember, and sex is a very tricky topic, especially when we talk a lot about sex addiction and betrayal trauma. It's complicated, and it's interesting because most couples that I see, they've experienced some betrayal recently. There's some addiction going on. Their intimacy and their trust and the foundation of their relationship is not very good. But sex persists. Sex continues. It goes and goes. And sex can be very destructive and unhealthy in the relationship, done in the wrong way. And what I want to say is that as we talk about sex and the topics we've talked about this month, I don't think have really like sent this message. But as we talk about sex and Sextember, what we're not saying is that you should be having sex and you should be having more and more sex. And the goal of a healthy relationship is intimacy, and that you do have emotional and spiritual and sexual connection. And sexual intimacy is such an important part of that. But don't should yourself into it. Work on the underneath, the foundational pieces, so that you can let it flourish. And so wherever you're at today, that's where you're at, and start there, and then you can move forward from there.
Yeah.
So
I think it is one of those body cues, right? Saying, hey, this is something that's uncomfortable. Maybe you don't want to listen to any of these episodes, or you've skipped them. Maybe you're listening a year later and you're
Right.
ready for it. That's okay.
Right.
But take that body cue, and it may take you, it took me a long time to get there, where I was ready to say, I'm working on the next step, which is my sexual intimacy.
it's pretty shocking, Ashlynn, that you want to talk about sex and want to go there with where you're at in your recovery, because you at times I'm sure you weren't there, right? You weren't in that space at all.
No, because the beginning of last year is when I really started to dive into it.
Right.
And to really like own it as my own, and not let Coby and his
Dictate
pressure
it,
and
yes.
yeah, and just say, you know what, I'm gonna figure this out for me, and I'll meet you where I'm at. And it just has been a really great journey for me personally to just have that. And so it is a big deal that
Yeah.
I've gone from like, we can't even have a conversation about sex, to, you know what, let's just talk with the world about
Right.
sex.
Here we are.
And
yeah.
we're definitely not sharing our, intimacy secrets with you. But
Absolutely.
yeah, we're here.
Awesome. So, okay, there's one thing that really breaks down healthy sex and relationship, and it's just that sex, from a very young age, we can be taught that sex is bad, dirty, wrong, disgusting, shameful, and those messages come in a bunch of different ways to us. And as we believe those things, that sex is bad or sex is dirty, we're all sexual beings, and therein lies hiding a lot of who we are sexually, because we just feel bad about who we are. And now let me talk about the different things that contribute to this message. First and foremost is your parents. If your parents are really awkward and uncomfortable with talking about sex, they're sending a message to you that, hey, this is an awkward, weird thing.
That maybe you shouldn't talk about.
But guess what? You're still going to be aroused, and you're still going to be attracted to people, and you're still going to have this drive that's inside of you, but let's not really talk about it because it's awkward and uncomfortable, right? So it sends that message of, this is weird.
And also a message of, something must be wrong with you when you do have those normal and sexual feelings.
Absolutely. So, and therein lies the development of shame, right? Something's wrong with me because who I really am is disgusting and wrong. So, yeah, if your parents didn't talk to you about it at all, they sent the message that, hey, we want to avoid this topic because it's hard to talk about. So I'm not trying to blame your parents, but a lot of parents suck at sex education. It's true.
Yeah.
And so there's that. There's also the religious side of things, which, if you're raised in a highly rigid religious system, there's a lot of messages about sex. And what are some of those messages?
That it's bad.
Period.
Yeah.
Save it till marriage, and if you don't, you are now broken.
Yeah.
Yeah. I on that note, I vividly remember being 20 and serving a church mission for my church, and this was all in the midst of trying to change my own life. But I remember vividly saying, while I was in the midst of masturbating, I want to marry a girl who was pure and virtuous and who hasn't had sex before marriage. I really remember saying that,
Mm-hmm.
and it was from a place definitely of shame, because I was really thinking about the place that I was coming from, because I had so much shame that I couldn't even serve a religious mission and not masturbate. And I just had these misconceptions that that was the thing to have, that was the thing to be, and because a person is it's defined by whether they have their virginity when they're married or not. And I mean, it was just out of ignorance, but also there was no shortage of pride and arrogance in that statement.
Right.
As a 20-year-old either.
Right.
Like superiority, you know what I mean?
Right.
Which is like completely ridiculous.
Okay, so you're superior because you're going to get a virtuous woman who's pure, right? The other thing that's interesting is lust. This idea of lust. Don't lust after somebody. I ask people a lot. Well, what is that? What is lust? And they give me their definition of it as to what they've been taught a lot of times at church about what lust is, and their definition is very much like, don't be sexual. Don't be sexual at all. That's lust. Sex and lust are the same thing in their mind, and that's not true. Sexuality is not lust. Lust is a self-indulgent fantasy that separates you from reality. Sexuality is reality. You have sexuality inside of you, and when the message is that God is looking down on your sexuality all the time, then you want to hide it and you feel bad. I'm not gonna get in the discussion. There's commandments. There's certain religions have certain beliefs that they believe in, like be it masturbation is bad or whatever it is. But I had a church leader once say, and this is really interesting, all growing up for me, the message was your sexuality is bad. When you're 12, 13 years old, don't have a sexual thought about a girl, And it's like, okay, how do I, as a 13-year-old boy, how do I turn that off? And masturbation is bad. Don't masturbate. Don't do this. Don't do that. All this stuff about sex. A few years back, a church leader, I heard him say, look, masturbation is something that every young man is going to do, and that they need to learn how to manage and deal with. And I heard that from a church leader, and it was like, what? That way of thinking was so much more accepting of what is, because the reality is what percentage of young boys and girls, for that matter, are masturbating? I don't think we have that research exactly, but
a large amount.
Yeah, most, right? Yeah. And so if most are masturbating, the answer to come down on them and say masturbation is bad, don't do it, what's going to happen is they're going to keep masturbating. They're just going to hide it.
And the shame builds.
And the shame builds, as opposed to having an open discussion about who they are and what their sexuality is and how to manage that.
Yeah, and the managing part, I think, is so interesting that you tie that in, because that's really what we're seeking in all of this. Is like, are we using sex as a release for stress? Are we using masturbation for, whatever those things are? So teaching that is also an emotional intelligence skill set.
Absolutely.
That we're saying, hey, we want to be able to do this as well.
But you don't teach that emotional intelligence skill set with rigidity, which is straight up don't do.
All or nothing.
What you do with that black or white, all or nothing, don't do system is just create this good girl syndrome and this good boy syndrome, which is, basically equating sex to something that's disgusting and dirty and wrong.
But I would also argue that along with that, there's also pain. It's like man-imposed, human-imposed pain and shame upon something that is beautiful, that is pleasurable, that is connecting, that's one of the treasured aspects of life and relationships.
And God-given.
And and God-given. And here we go as
so
humans.
Let me try to rephrase what you said, Coby. What force and control around sexuality doesn't encourage healthy sexuality, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
And if some man comes in and says, this is how you do it, or this is that. Now, and what I'm hearing you say, Ashlynn, is what encourages the development of healthy sexuality is emotional intelligence and connection and learning and openness.
Yeah,
right?
and that safe place to even ask questions.
Absolutely.
Which I'm not going to lie, like even as adults, me opening the topic over on my social media is, I think, very liberating for grown women to say, like, oh, you're giving me a space that I can ask these questions that I don't necessarily dare even ask anyone.
So let's talk about what this good girl syndrome is, and good boy syndrome for that matter as well. Before we do, I want to say, we talked about religion, we talked about parents. The other thing that can really drive sex is disgusting or wrong is addiction. As you're acting out with pornography, it's something you're indulging in and using, but it's also something that you're feeling horrible about. And so you're constantly rejecting and shaming yourself about your sexuality. So, as your sexuality is developing, it's intertwined with shame because of the addiction as well. So that's something as well. And it's interesting, our producer, he was just saying, well, do guys have, do porn addicts have this good boy syndrome too? And I said, almost all of them. Because all of them have this deep down feeling of disgust and shame around their sexuality. And so, they feel disgusting and wrong about a lot of things that they're doing.
But can I just point out something here? Because I always knew I had good girl syndrome.
Right.
Because it really was for me like the flip of a switch. Like, don't do it. Now you're married. Go for it.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I don't know how to flip that switch overnight.
Yes.
And so it was really hard for me. And so we didn't even go there with Coby. Like, he definitely didn't have it because he had this other problem of addiction that he was...
Well, and he's just indulging and he's just enjoying and Yeah, so
I think he also felt like, I'm up here, you're down here. You've got to figure out sex.
I'm this healthy one who's open to stuff, and you're this shut down one that isn't, right?
For sure.
Let's define what this is, this good girl or boy syndrome, okay? It's feeling guilt or shame more so around pleasure. So if you allow yourself to orgasm, if you allow yourself to explore, to try things with a partner, then you just feel disgusting and wrong and perverted. And so, it shuts down your sexuality, where you'd rather not go there and do those type of things because it just feels bad, although it feels really good, right? So that's what that is. Does that make sense?
I would also add self to it, right? You said, what did you say? Explore, understand with your partner. But I would also say, I think that my good boy syndrome started, as an adolescent.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like meaning I was masturbating and looking at porn, really just exploring myself. But then I would go to church and hear messages, about all the ways that I was bad. And so I think that that can happen as a couple with a partner, but also individually as well.
Right. Okay. So I agree, Coby. I'm just trying to think.
I'm gonna say this because you said something that I think could trigger a lot of the betrayed.
Okay.
Because you said, I'm just exploring myself, but I'm looking at porn and masturbating.
Right.
So I would say you were doing more than exploring.
Yeah. To be sure, but to be sure, without question. And I didn't mean to glaze over that. I didn't mean to be so dismissive of that. But I think it's I just think it has application both with partners and individuals.
Okay. So, yeah, what are we suggesting here? Okay. So there's two sides to this coin. Okay. There's the side of go be sexual and enjoy and be you and just bust yourself free and go for it, right? And then there's the other side, which is like, look, there's boundaries and there's there is some guilt there that keeps us in check to make sure that we're safe and that things are good in a relationship, right? That's kind of the two extremes. Okay. So the syndrome, so to speak, it takes those boundaries to the furthest degree. Let's surround sex with shame to keep you in check. Okay. The other side of it is kind of this indulgent side of forget it. I'm going to let myself go. So where is healthiness? Can both these things exist at the same time?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, absolutely. So how?
I
I'm gonna
think.
stump you guys.
Oh, well then I'll tell my answer and you can tell
No,
me
go
wrong.
for it, Ashlynn. I love it.
I would say for me it was safety before I could even move forward with choosing this, okay? To be like, I'm going to be more open. I'm going to be willing. I'm going to allow myself to go there.
Yes.
And to kind of like own my stuff, but also like I want to do something about it.
Let me I love what you're saying, Ashlynn, but I want to clarify what go there means.
Okay.
It doesn't mean rip your clothes off and go have sex with Coby as much as you can, right?
Right.
Sorry for the but what it does mean is go educate yourself about what healthy sexuality is.
For me.
For you.
Yes.
Find good resources that give you permission to step into what healthy sexuality is.
Yeah.
Not
And
just hide your head in the sand, right?
That's exactly what I did. And I kind of like cringe a little because I've grown even as I've started the journey of I'm going to educate myself and look at different sources and figure this out.
Right.
I remember messaging you and being like, this is what this person said, and it hits me wrong because of my betrayal trauma. Like, what do you think about this? And you know, there are things that are going to speak to you that you're going to have to like sit in and question. And is this coming from this good girl syndrome? Is this coming from my trauma?
Maybe you got a bad resource, you know?
Maybe that.
But
like where you can't just take it all in and be like, okay.
But I think, Ashlynn, if you're willing to go there, you're willing to educate yourself, then you tap into your intuition, you tap into your gut, and it's like, okay, I will, even though that's uncomfortable for me, maybe it feels true, so maybe I'll sit with that and explore that. Maybe it totally doesn't feel true, and I'm not going to listen to that podcast anymore, or I'm not going to read that book anymore. You know, and so it's trusting your gut, but it's still being open to, look, this good girl syndrome thing isn't working for me. You know, fierce control and rigidity and shame around sexuality, that's really not helping me be the best version of me. And so I'll go search and I'll find things that speak to me, that help unleash and help me break free from some of the bonds of shame that I'm in around sexuality, right? Okay. So I kind of stepped in, Ashlynn, sorry.
Okay.
So educating yourself about it is really important.
Creating the safety.
Absolutely.
Because by me saying I'm stepping into this, it was also like Coby backing off.
Yes.
Because there wasn't, we could have open discussions about sex, but it wasn't you anymore, it was I.
Yes.
And that's a giant difference.
Yes. There is such a paradox that I try to get, you know, the men in my groups come in and they complain, like, my wife doesn't want to have sex, we never have sex, and I'm listening to them and I'm like, yeah, I can totally see why. Because you're constantly pressuring and destroying safety, and there's this place where when pressure is taken off, obligation is gone, and exploration is opened up, then sexuality flourishes.
It's the craziest thing, because you would think, I thought the opposite would happen. So say Sextember, I thought, oh my gosh, like saying we're gonna have sex every day, that sounds controlling, that sounds like forceful. It felt like all these things, and what it turned into was the opposite.
Right.
It took all of the like questioning, if I do this, will he think I'm gonna want to have sex? It was just like, oh no, we're having sex, so we might as well enjoy the day and be playful, and you know, and it just changed things for me.
And it works the opposite way too. If you do a sex fast and it's done in the right way, it's like, oh, that's off the table. So
now I want you.
Yeah, now I want you because the pressure's gone. You know.
Totally true.
So yeah, okay. So education, safety, okay. There's also some courage there that it's going to take to explore some things. So like you know, I've worked with people who have had like 7 kids and never had an orgasm. How does that happen? You know, I've talked about this before. That sex is happening, but sex is all about children, and sex is all about him, probably, right? So for her to be able to step into it's scary for that woman to step into, I'm going to figure out what I like and who I am and what does it for me, and I'm going to start to speak that to my partner, and I'm going to start to be more open about that and enjoy that more, and face the shame as it comes and learn how to let it go as I enjoy and feel this pleasure, right?
Yeah. And I just want to let you, if you are listening and you are that mama,
you're not
You're
alone.
not alone. No. That's the most common question I've had all month is like, can you please answer how to figure this out? Because I didn't realize that I was the only, like I'm not the only one.
So how to have an orgasm.
As a woman.
We should do a full episode just on that. But the one thing that I do want to say is what Ashlynn said earlier, is all women are different. And I won't get into the specifics of the biology of it all or anything like that. But if you're struggling with orgasm, then it's probably an issue in your relationship about connection and attraction. But more so, it's about you figuring out your own individual sexuality. Who are you, and what works for you, and so stepping into that can be scary if you have a lot of shame around it. So,
Agreed.
You know, the interesting part about this is I'm just sitting here reflecting about the good boy syndrome that that I have experienced and still do have. And I would say that one of the big ways that it showed up for me is rejecting my own sexuality.
yeah.
Like, for me, that's how good boy syndrome showed up. And that showed up even as an adolescent, you know, and certainly in our marriage. And what I mean by that is just thinking that I'm bad if I have a template that says A, B, or C.
Yes.
Or because it has that, I am bad. And I've no right to ask Ashlynn or even talk to Ashlynn about that. I think my shame shut me down for years, for actually probably most of the years, right, Ashlynn? In talking about that. And even still, it's challenging and hard. This month has represents a lot of strides that we have made, I think, in just talking very frankly and in a very, very open way about sex and even sexuality. And it's been really important, but I've had moments where I'm like, Ashlynn, I'm going to say this, but I'm really scared to, but I'm just going to have courage to say it anyways. And I would just go, blah. And it's that's the piece for me. I think that's where the good boy syndrome showed up. I don't know if you have any other observations, Ashlynn, for me, but that's for sure where I would.
Can I comment here? Sobriety and recovery, sobriety from sex addiction, long-term sobriety. Short-term sobriety can come from shame. It can come from forcing it. Long-term sobriety from sex addiction comes from an acceptance of your sexuality and stepping into it. And I know that sounds backwards, but it comes from having peace with yourself and knowing who you are. And you're able to deal with it and manage it much better when you don't have all the negative energy up against it. So when you love yourself, you know what your arousal template is, you understand who you are, then you can manage it. You can have boundaries around it that are really healthy. And you know that there's this undercurrent of treatment in places where it's let's teach you how to reject your sexuality so you can overcome your sex addiction.
What? Wait, seriously?
Totally. Let's teach you how to not be a sexual person so you can overcome your sex addiction. And the opposite is actually true. Let's teach you how to know who you are, love yourself, and accept yourself
Wow.
so that you can overcome your sex addiction. And that's what you're describing.
Is that paradox of rejecting my sexuality? Would you say that played a role in my acting out?
No question.
Because it was a catalyst to shame, and then the shame was the big thing that led to relapse.
Yeah, I mean, let me walk you through. So you feel bad and unworthy of love and acceptance. You eventually go find that in a false way through pornography, lust, and acting out in those ways. And you feel good in those moments, and it feeds the cycle back around, making you feel bad about who you are and who you are sexually, right? So, it's really interesting. A guy who can say, I totally desire to look at porn today, is much less likely to look at porn than the guy who's saying, no, I'm not looking at porn today, I'm not going to do that, but deep down really desires to look at porn. The guy who's open about it, honest about it, knows who he is, he has some power there, and not force. He has some power there. So that good boy syndrome will drive you. That trying to be good enough sexually, trying to show people who you are, and that will drive you back to addiction.
Isn't there like some sense of belonging that is found in a relationship by being the good boy or by being the good girl with your partner?
Absolutely not. So what do you mean, Coby?
I know. I'm like, I don't know.
I'm gonna say no. I disagree with you on that. But what I'm saying is I would argue that I actually falsely so. Okay, falsely so.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right, but I would say that in order for me to feel like I belong in our relationship, Ashlynn, I would try to be the good boy to fit in because I perceived you as being the good girl.
But like secretly you were the not good.
Yeah, and
well, yeah, I was. So what I'm saying is I would like deny myself, but that was probably subconscious. It was more like I would shame myself back into this box of, I guess, the good boy box, if you will.
that will never
shrink.
create connection.
For sure, because it was like I would just try to fit in, but
You'd be a poser, a faker,
completely.
to try to get her to stay with
completely.
you, right?
And then this conversation is also making me think about all of the ways that codependency in this arena shows up for me.
Absolutely.
I don't know what you're thinking, Ashlynn. Maybe
You can't fake your way into love,
no.
right? And that's if you're trying to be a good enough boy, then you're actually feeding the cycle again, because it's like, well, she accepts me when I'm good enough like this. So she accepts my fake self, my false self, my good enough self. When in reality, especially the polarity of masculine and feminine, she'll want you when you are authentic and honest and strong and not fake, right? You follow me?
Sure.
And so...
Is that scary, though, Ashlynn, in some sense? In moments of honesty for you? Like, wait, he's...
When Brannon says that, I just go to, like, yes.
Yeah.
I so understand the whole, like, needy of I'm trying to, can you accept me?
I'm trying to be
And
good
then,
enough.
Then, like, oh no, like, I can show up, I can be me, this is me.
Absolutely.
But then there's this other part that comes out in Coby of, this is me.
Yeah.
Like, and that part is so...
And for
it's
those
like,
of you who are listening and couldn't
it's
see
the
Ashlynn's...
F-U, this is me. And it does swing, and I don't know if that's like an addict behavior where it's like...
When I say strong and powerful and authentic, it's not that.
Yeah.
Right? I call that swinging the pendulum from your codependent compliant self to the screw you.
Independent.
Right? And you know, in the middle there's the honest, real self.
Which is attractive.
Who can be loving and kind to his partner, but honest at the same time.
Yes.
I think in those moments when I have done that, I have felt shame for being honest and still felt judged, I think, is what has brought on the FU kind of a thing. And that just shows, obviously just reveals the work that we still need to do, but it's like a conscious choice. It is like a very conscious choice. And what's staggering to me about this is that, just like you said at the very beginning, it's like sex can still take place, even with the good girl, the good boy syndrome. And does that mean, therefore, that means we have to go back and kind of unwind some things in order to safely put in place the relationship,
Sometimes,
like the cornerstones
yes.
of the relationship?
Well, I posted a quote today: progress is found in the unlearning. And
Yes.
that's exactly what
That's
this
interesting.
whole process is unlearning stories we've told ourselves, things we've been taught.
Yep.
And this is just another piece of recovery work. But it's work. I feel lucky that we have been compelled to do this work, because look at the people who follow me, not on this social media account, but on my other one for fitness, who are showing up without our story, and they're not compelled to do anything about their marriage,
Right.
and they're hurt, and they have a crappy sex life, and they have
Right.
no trust. And
Right.
I feel lucky that, as sucky as that sounds, we feel compelled to do something different.
Yes, I love it. Progress is found in the unlearning. Love it.
So how do we move through this? How does a couple move through this, or an individual move through this, Brannon? To face the good girl.
You blame your spouse for all of your problems.
Oh,
and-
good. Okay, I got that. And we're out.
and that's it. No, get to work. If it's not working for you, then what is in your control? Get humble and get open to new possibilities. If your line of thinking is getting you the results in your life that you're getting, then shift your thinking. Find some good examples of people who have healthy sex life.
Go find a sex therapist as a couple.
Be careful, but be careful where you go. But
yeah, that's where I got in a little bit of like, oh no, everything I've been taught for betrayal trauma, and like it had me questioning. It was safe. I just wasn't super ready.
Right.
I think.
Right.
So for me, what worked better was like finding maybe podcasts and books that I could like have bits at a time,
Mm-hmm.
and be more directed in what I wanted to learn and what I was okay moving forward.
Uh-huh.
To sit and allow myself to sit.
Well,
in that.
one line of thinking that we're taught all the time is that keep sex to yourself. Don't talk about it. And I think it's really healthy to talk to your girlfriends about some things, like what does work and what's you don't have to share every last detail of everything, but to be able to have open conversations and draw from other people different thoughts and ideas is helpful as well. So and then the next thing is to have some courage to step into some new things. So you think something different, and then you behave differently. You see how it works for you, and if it doesn't work, then you pull back and you try something different.
Yeah. I would also mention it's a lot of the same idea with beginning recovery work. Just let it take its course. Like it might take you a quicker
There's a
amount of time
process.
than it took me. It may take you longer. There is no wrong way of doing
Yes.
it. Just allow yourself to be in it.
Right.
Cool. This has been a good episode, at least for us. So, guys, appreciate you being here. And don't forget, rate and review. And, we'll see you again.
Okay, see you guys.